Introducing a lineup of international award-winning and talented indie authors, only on the Writers' Corner live show. In today's episode of the Writers' Corner live show, we dive into the psyche of horror with Moshaty. She's a writer, a lecturer, and producer. She unveils the secrets behind the latest anthology, Love the Sinner, and discusses the intersection of psychology and storytelling. Don't go away. We'll be right back with the Writers' Corner live show. Welcome to the Writers' Corner live show, the weekly water cooler for authors and readers. Join us for 30 minutes of insightful conversation with some of the biggest names in the industry. We feature award-winning authors, New York Times and USA Today bestsellers, and even international indie sensations. Tune in and join our family-friendly community only on the Writers' Corner live show. If you have just joined us, then welcome to the Writers' Corner live show. If you're not following us yet, please do so that you'll get notified the next time we go live. I'm your host, Moshaty Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and my co-host, Mary, will join us next time. Today's show, we're going to be talking to Moshaty. Mo, if you have not met her before, is a horror writer, a lecturer, and producer who brings a very unique twist to the genre as a cognitive behavioral therapist. And as a lecturer, she delves into the deep psychological aspects of horror. She produced the 13 Minutes of Horror Film Fest for women identifying creatives, forging partnerships with industry giants such as the Shudder Channel. In collaboration with Stowe Story Labs, their fellowship supports women in horror over 40. In her latest work that we'll be talking about today, Love the Sinner explores the consequences of sins in a distorted and deadly landscape. Lisa Kröger describes it as a chilling anthology that unravels the twisted reality of the human psyche, proving that man is the scariest monster. So without any further ado, let's invite Mo to join me, shall we? Mo, welcome. Thanks very much for joining me on the Writers' Corner live show. I am so delighted that you could join me today.
Perfect. No, I'm excited. This is great. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. We always love, or I never get tired of interviewing authors. Mary and I have been doing this for 6 years, and every author's journey is so different and so unique that every week we look forward to the show just to find out what the backstory is of the author and the book and why they write and how they write. So I'm going to jump right into it.
Sure.
And ask you what sparked your journey into horror writing, and could you share a moment or experience that ignited your passion for crafting such amazing, chilling tales?
Wow. I mean, I think no writer is going to say that it didn't start when they were very, very young. I mean, everyone's always said, I've always loved writing. I've always done this. For me, it was just being a latchkey kid. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but latchkey kids usually were left to fend for themselves. Their adults were working full time or going to school at night. I was the youngest of three daughters. And my mother worked full time and went to night school in the late 70s, early 80s. So for me, it was really left to our own devices to play, to create our own world, spend our own time together. We would play together and then we'd get very sick of each other and then we would go do our own things. So for me, it was definitely imagination, playing pretend. But I also got a hold of my eldest sister, who is 10 years older than me. I would always sneak her books because to me, she was the coolest person in the room. She was the oldest. She was getting out and living and doing a bunch of really cool things. And her friends would always give her horror books to read. So I would always steal her horror books as like, 7 or 8 years old, reading these terrible books that I'm not supposed to be reading, like Stephen King. Ray Bradbury is who I really gravitated towards very, very early on, with his science fiction horror stories. So for me, it really started from there, is really being so engrossed in these worlds and really allowing myself to feel that fear and be able to be scared and kind of reveling in that and wanting to continue the story. So falling in love with a lot of these characters and then writing my own, which is now called fan fiction, writing my own continuation of those stories, from falling in love with those characters is what really got me into writing that type of genre very, very, very early. And learning that maybe I should maybe not go places so dark, as I learned getting into my, grammar school, junior school writing classes, where they're just like, we want to talk to you about your daughter's story. You might want to talk to her about things. And my mother had known that, I'd had a big love of horror very early on. So that was the seeds of writing horror and science fiction very, very early in my life, continued all the way through my college career and my creative writing courses. And I've never really stopped. I've really just kind of lived in those two genres. I do write comedy for screenwriting, but that's a whole different world to me. But I've never really strayed from writing sci-fi and horror from a very, very young age.
That's amazing. I mean, I can just imagine your teachers going, I'd like to talk to your mom. It's like, what's going on here?
Right. Is your daughter okay? Yeah, no, 100%. Couple of meetings like that. So there's like, can't you just write a happy story? I was like, but this is happy. It's great.
Oh my goodness. If you could swap lives with a fictional horror character for a day,
Oh,
who would it be and why?
swap lives with a fictional character. Wow. Honestly, it would probably be, there is a story by, oh gosh, now I have to narrow it down. There's a story by Stephen King that he had written recently in a collection of stories. I've always loved his short form as opposed to his novels. Not that his novels aren't absolutely amazing, but there's a short story he has in a collection called oh God, it's not Dance Macabre. Oh, now everything's escaping me, but the story is called Mile 81, and it is about this young boy who has an older brother that he idolizes, which I kind of really related to very quickly as in idolizing my older sisters. But he is kind of being forced to hang out with the older brother, and the older brother kind of ditches him, loses him, and hangs out with his other friends. And while this child is exploring on his own, he stumbles upon this abandoned fast food joint. It's not, it's in disrepair. It's obviously home to squatters and things like that. And in the parking lot is this very abandoned, broken down, muddy looking car. And the car is kind of like, if you've read his story, Christine, where you have the haunted vehicle and things like that, is how this young boy deals with the vehicle and everybody that encounters this vehicle. He watches what happens to them and definitely tries to help defeat them. And it's just a really interesting story about how kids there's so many horror stories that are based on children being either the product of the evil or having to fight against it. And I've always been so excited to read stories of children who are basically like the meek shall inherit the earth kind of stories where they are the hero. Because I feel like even in horror, kids need to feel that. They need to feel that they can they have control a little bit, you know, because we don't when we're kids. Our parents are the rulers, our teachers are the rulers. We don't have a lot of opportunities to become the hero or save the world
Or
or
be a voice, yeah.
be a
Or
voice,
have a
things
voice.
of that nature. And in this story, which it still really, really haunts me because it's just a child that is in charge of basically saving all the adults that don't listen to reason, that think that they are going to be the ones that are going to solve the problem. And it's probably him. I can't think of what, like my mind is blanking. I can't think of what his name is, but the story is Mile 81 and probably the main protagonist from that story. I would like to feel empowered in a way that I guess I didn't when I was a kid because I was the youngest. I wasn't necessarily bullied by my sisters or anything like that, but I was always the one that was given the least credit to have a voice, you know, that to have input or to tell the stories that I was telling. Like, this happened to me at school today, and it was like, oh, you're exaggerating. Oh, that this didn't happen. Like, it was always being discounted. And I feel,
Discounted, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like I think I gravitated to that story very quickly because I was just like, this kid has the power to change, literally change the world and what's happening around him.
Isn't
Um,
it amazing how our childhood experiences shape who we become,
oh,
you know,
100%.
in your adult lives? And I mean, I'm just listening to you now and how you felt that your voice was suppressed, and now, you know, in your writing you can give expression to yourself,
Hmm.
um, and
Yeah.
give a voice, and almost give permission to other children to have a voice, as well, you know, just listening to how you recounting this. Do you have you had any um, inspiration that you've drawn from a unexpected or weird source in, you know,
Oh,
writing your horror stories?
yeah. I think that what's interesting to me is being that kind of hanging on to those moments that I had when I was a child and we were alone. And I don't want it to be like, you know, we were just destitute and abandoned. We weren't. We were just, you know, in our own world and having that kind of freedom to be as wild and as crazy in my imagination as a child, that I don't think we give ourselves enough leeway to be scared or to try or to go for things as an adult. I feel like we're so fearless as children, and children aren't given as much credit with that because they're just like, oh, being a scaredy cat, you're being little, you of course you were scared because you were small. But I feel like we're so fearless as children, we'll try anything. I mean, as babies, we'll like, what is that? I want to eat it. I want to like experience this. I want to go here. I want to walk. And I feel like as adults we get a little more fearful of life, and we begin to fear more because we understand that there's stakes involved
It's a
now.
learned experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I think my inspiration for writing more horror, really just kind of sticking with it and really going for it, is trying to, I guess, perpetually tell my young self that, you know, it's okay to be fearless, it's okay to keep going, it's okay to keep writing scary, it's okay to be dark because there's always, you know, there's always another side, and it's okay that you're inspired by, you know, terrible things and terrible people, which is kind of hence where love the sinners idea came from. But I think that it's, for me, that inspiration is always just little me being unafraid to write scary, to do scary things, to try. So I think I try to kind of honor that every time that I write.
Oh wow. Okay, so my next question for you is a fun one. If one of your horror stories were adapted to a sitcom, who would you cast? I mean, that's everyone's dream, right?
Right?
Who would you cast to play the quirky, unsuspecting neighbor that always
Oh,
finds themselves entangled in supernatural chaos?
oh my gosh. So funny. Oh man. Geez. There is. Does it have to be from this book, or it could be anything that
No,
I
it could
read?
be it could be any one of your stories.
Well, there is a story that I have coming out in a. I have another book, which is a 2 volume set coming out through Spooky House Press next year, and there's a story where there is a neighbor who basically knocks at the most inopportune time. And I think that would be, that quirky neighbor would probably have to be, oh man, who I would posthumously, I would love it to be Madeline Kahn, but it's not. I think probably this neighbor from the story would probably have to be Kate McKinnon. She's from Saturday Night Live fame and Ghostbusters, because just of the deadpan timing and not knowing that they are, number one, it's the worst time possible for you to be coming over here, and then completely kind of glazing over the really horrific or supernatural things that are happening and just being like, oh, guess it's just how it is over here. Your life is so fun. Probably Kate McKinnon. Not just, I am thinking of this story because in my head I'm cackling, but you have no idea what the story is.
Oh my goodness. So, Love the Sinner.
Mm-hmm.
In each story, it explores the consequences of sins in a distorted landscape.
Yes.
And if you had to pick one sin from the anthology that you would believe would make an entertaining game show challenge, which sin would it be? And how would the contestants compete?
Ooh. I love this question because I think that probably one of the most insidious sins that there is pride. And I think that for the game show, it would probably have to be, how would they compete? Like, what would be the rules of the game show? Is that my question?
Yeah, yes.
I think pride is, I think it would have to be where we're, and I thought not really envy, but I think we're so proud of who we are and what our outward, not only our outward appearance, our attitude, but also how people kind
People
of
are consumed by it.
Yeah, into a have or a have not. And I think that pride would have to be kind of giving, like chipping away, almost like a truth or dare or true or false. Like, is this how you really live? Did this really happen to you? How are you really feeling about this person? And I think it would really need to chip away how honest we are with ourselves.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah. How honest are you with yourself? And not necessarily like on a lie detector aspect, but
No,
who are you when nobody's watching you?
that's a very good one.
But I think that pride is probably the worst, the most insidious sin there is, because we do things and I think as we grow older, even in our teen aspect, when we're formative and things are social and we're forming like friend groups, and then you have those clashes between friend breakups, and you're trying to run with this pack and now these people don't like you. I think we learn very early on to perform for others, and to always remain.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
Isn't that just sad?
And always remain liked for some reason, or for the right reasons. So I think that would be we would call it a game show, but it would be very dramatic. Very dramatic.
It would. It would indeed. It would indeed. What would you say is one of the most fascinating or unusual research that you've had to do for your horror writing?
Oh gosh. Well, a lot of it really stems from my studies in behavioral science, especially for really the basis of what Love the Sinner is that we're all guilty of all of these. We've all committed, all of us have committed all of these sins at one point or another, to one degree or another. But it's in really the focus of how, as human beings, we will justify whatever we've had to do, whether it's caused harm to somebody or embarrassment or misery, or even, in the long run, harm to ourselves. We are able to justify all of those acts because of what we wanted at the time. Like you go through researching even through like true crime and crimes of passion, and it's like, oh, well, this person, had put a hit out on their spouse because they were in love with somebody else and didn't want to get divorced, so they would rather just have this person completely eliminated, and they could justify that because they wanted to start a new life, or they had someone fired from their job because they wanted their position, and all they could see was the ambition there, and I'm justified, I'm more qualified, so I just have to eliminate this person. So I think my research has just been how consistent that justification is throughout these types of sins, like lust, like envy, like pride. We'll do something to make somebody feel bad about themselves so we feel better because we could justify that, and it's across the board, even from really, petty crimes, like petty larceny, stealing, bikes, cars, things like that, into, actual crimes, violent crimes, things like that. That justification is so consistent across the board because all we could see was the end game, and that was enough. That was enough. I'm going to get that
like distorted reality.
Yeah. I'm going to get that. So whatever I have to do to get that is all I care about. And I think that was probably research-wise was the most concerning. I think,
as if it's almost as if everyone feels that the end justifies the means.
Yep.
As they say.
Yeah, 100%. And that's and like I said, the consistency is what was really the scary part for me, because I was like, oh, well, surely, something petty. Oh, I stole your bike and, X, Y, and Z. But even to where, you have these violent things happening, people are still could figure out, well, don't you understand? Like, this is why I did it. Like, doesn't it make sense why I would have done it? Or people will say, well, if you hadn't done X, I wouldn't have done Y.
Shifting the blame, basically.
Yeah, so it's always either a projection or it's a justification, and that never wavered throughout that whole process, which was really pretty scary.
Very interesting
Yeah.
Study, and something to really delve into. So Love Thy Sinner takes readers into a distorted and almost deadly landscape of human psyche. If you were to create a quirky tagline for the book that captures the essence in a humorous way, what would it be?
A quirky tagline. I would probably say, oh God, quirky. I can't think. I would probably say, get ready to not like anyone in this book. I mean, they're all, they're not most, and that was one interesting thing with trying to pitch this book, is that a lot of these characters, actually all of these characters, are 100% relatable characters, but also 100% unlikable characters. Like, you shouldn't be rooting for these people, but you can't help but find parts of yourself within them, which I think is such an interesting mirror for not only like the reader, because when you go in thinking like sins, oh, there's a religious aspect to it to a point, but there's no devil in this book. There's no religion in this book. It's really just kind of like putting visually, my cover is a little bit of a misnomer on that, but I think that is what people equate with sin, is the religious aspect of it. But really, the not so quirky tagline for the book is that man is the scariest monster. So it's really us we have to contend with, and our internal workings that are our worst enemy. But quirky, I'd probably say, yeah, don't plan on liking anybody in this book.
Oh my goodness.
You're not your friend.
Have you ever had a a funny or unexpected reaction to somebody reading one of your stories?
Oh yeah. I had a friend of mine, before I had actually finished the edits on this. I had a friend of mine that is not in the literary world, which I always welcome, because sometimes if you get in that vacuum, you kind of not necessarily lose your eye for certain things, but it's nice to have somebody that doesn't have any real weight, to give you a really honest opinion on it. And there is my story of envy, which is called Free Weight. Started off as a screenplay, and it has now been elongated into a short story. And they had said, I that's probably my favorite story in the book. Why is everybody you write such a jerk? I was like, I don't know. Just because people that are jerky might do bad things more often, I would assume. But they were just like, they're just a jerk. Like, and they just couldn't get over like how funny it was to. They're like, the story was so good, but this character is just like, oh my God, this guy is just such a leech on humanity. Like, they're just so like, why is the story so good when this person is so bad? And it made me laugh, because I was like, that's the reaction I want out of the story from someone outside the bubble. But also, like, they just couldn't get over how they were just like, I don't think I've read something where I wasn't, cheering somebody on, or just like, oh my gosh, are they going to make it? I'm so fearful for them. Like, I'm really invested. And they like felt bad. Like, I feel bad about myself that I was invested in this person that is not a good person. And I was like, then that's job done.
Oh my goodness.
Job done.
Mo, do you have a copy of your book with you?
I do. It's right
Oh, do
here.
you want to hold it up? Oh, there we go.
There we go. Get him on
Now,
the light.
oh, it's a nice shiny cover. Who
Mm.
designed the cover for you, and did you have any input into that?
I did. The design for the, oh my God, I'm going to butcher the name. Their design for the cover is, I have to look up the design. I believe it was Elizabeth Leggett. And we really, really, really wanted to make sure that we had the point across of visually something that looked like death. And we went through a few designs of, is it this? Is it this? And some had a few, some imagery that was like, yeah, I'm not really seeing it. And then we landed on this, and I was like, I feel like visually, this is what people equate with sin, which is like an old abandoned church. You've got the skull, you've got like the veil of mourning, and as much as there is a spoiler, some death in the book. I think this is so representative of the stories that are in here, because there's not just physical death in the book. There's also just emotional death, walking away from situations, walking away from things that are mentally taxing. And I think those are the relatable pieces of the characters in the book that are really either stressed to the limit or super passionate about what they believe in, and they're still not getting what they deserve or desire, and having to work that out. And I've fallen in love with it. I call it my little Scully book, because it just means it's, books are your babies when you put them out. And I think that for me, this is so representative of the scope of the book. So I'm really, really pleased with it.
Oh, that's awesome. And just some advice for new authors out there. Would you recommend having a publicist when you're writing?
I think if you're lucky enough to, because especially the presses that you're involved in, some of us are self-publishing, and if you have that leeway in your pocket to do that for publicists, some presses make them available to you. I think that they're really invaluable on the sect of you can't do it alone unless you're a complete octopus and have your arms and everything. You really can't do it alone, especially being an indie author. We're not all Peter Straubs, we're not all Stephen Kings that have everybody knows who we are, and they know once we put out something that they can go pick it up. You do need the support of someone, whether it be marketing or things put together like podcasting and wonderful shows like this of this nature. It's helpful. It really is helpful to get more people exposed to your work in all the avenues that you can.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, because I think, sometimes, or first-time author maybe is often under the illusion that, you write your book, your baby's on the shelf, and it's just going to sell itself. But it couldn't be further from truth. It does, until you become a well-known author, it does take a lot of work. And I think that's where one sees the value of having a good publicist, because they've got the connections, they've got the network that can give you a leg up, and really sort of help you set yourself apart in the marketplace.
Yeah, but 100%, because it's difficult. It's difficult out there. I mean, getting on your socials and really don't stop tooting your own horn. I mean, that is something that I've learned over this last year, is just being maybe too humble for what I'm trying to do. Is like, I don't want to talk about myself too much. I don't want to brag too much. But you really have to be comfortable with being out there and kind of exposing your work as much as possible, because no one's going to know it's out there if you don't talk about it. So.
Absolutely. And that's a good note to end on. Mo, thank you so much. It was lovely having you on the Writers Corner live show. And we'd love to have you back when is your next book out? Should
be early spring, April or May.
Fantastic. We'd love to have you back again.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mo. And to our amazing audience out there, thanks for joining us. And we'd love to see you on the next episode of the Writers Corner live show. Take care and we'll chat soon. Thank you for joining us on the Writers Corner live show. 30 minutes of insightful author conversations with some of the biggest names in the industry, including award-winning authors and international indie sensations. Join us on the next episode of the Writers Corner live show.